Yo, I have opinions. Hello friends and welcome back to the channel, but if you're new, hi, hello. I am Artsy over at the Artsy Gamer. I make art, I play games, and I encourage others to do the same. And within the last couple of months, within the last year, I should say, I have been dipping my toes into understanding accessibility within the realms of gaming. And this is the first time that I've actually really considered, what about the hardware that we use for gaming in general? Now, I'm going to be honest, I only use really two things in order to play games, which is my PC, as well as the Nintendo Switch, and now the Nintendo Switch 2. I have thousands of hours on the Nintendo Switch, and I really enjoy the console despite the various grievances, which rightfully so should be a continued conversation. But when I got the Nintendo Switch 2, I was really excited because it seemed that a lot of the issues that we were having with the Nintendo Switch seemed to have been fixed. And I'm really excited to share this review with you because on one hand, everyone and everyone's grandma is talking about the Nintendo Switch 2, their unboxings, their first impressions, how it feels, how it plays, but we don't really have the conversation about how hardware impacts people who struggle with playing games at all, which is why accessibility is super important. Another huge disclaimer that I'm going to have for this, and I say this in every single accessibility video, that I am an able-bodied person. I'm not impacted in any physical way that makes it difficult to play a game, whether it has to do with visual impairments, audio impairments, or physical impairments that makes it impossible for me to play a game at, its base value. I am coming at accessibility from an ability privilege. And so I will always recommend that if you know a content creator or a reviewer who has a disability, I would strongly advise that you take their word over mine when it comes to how it feels for them. But I do believe that accessibility is for everyone, and we should highlight the things that Nintendo did really well with the Switch 2 and where it kind of, well, could have been better. So yeah, the Switch 2. The box is compact, it's sexy, it's shiny, it's sleek, and this is the first console that I've ever gotten at launch. So I will say that the nostalgia of Nintendo, but also the excitement of being a content creator and getting to do this for the first time with my other friends on YouTube and Twitch and really on the internet, I think colored my perceptions of what to expect for the Switch 2 in general. Now, we were all really excited for the fact that it was going to be a larger screen, it was going to have a different mechanic for the Joy-Cons, and overall, we were really excited for the graphics, but I'm always going to argue that graphics don't make a good game or a good hardware system. It's certainly nice, and you will get more information in how to deal with whatever you're playing in your game, but again, graphics don't make a better game or a better console. Sure, it makes a really good experience, but that shouldn't be the main focus. The additional thing I want to mention is there is a lot of rightfully so criticism when it comes to the Switch 2 price, especially since that, there are things that I think the Switch does better inherently than the Switch 2, but we're going to be talking about a couple of things with this review. One, the physical hardware perceptions that I have about the console itself, and then we're going to talk about the options that are in an accessibility tab in the hardware software itself. So this is my Switch, the Switch 2. I was originally really surprised by the heft and the weight, and I wouldn't consider that a good thing, mostly because the sleekness of the design makes it feel like I don't have a good grip on the console at all. And I'm the sort of person that likes to play the Switch, really anywhere. The bed, the sofa, on the floor, in the bathtub. And so not having a good grip anywhere from like where you place your hands to here in general, I feel like I'm about to drop it at any given point. And the way that I described it when I was talking about this video in a live stream was like, it feels like you're holding a laptop, but in a really awkward angle. And it feels like you're going to drop it at any given moment. In comparison to, my other Switch, one of my two, where I can literally just move this around and not have any sort of fear about dropping it. So because this is larger, if you have small hands like me, because I am a shorter person, you're going to have to be very careful with how you grip your Switch too, especially since it's really expensive. Now again, the sleekness is fun. It is sexy, it is shiny. It also feels that with the magnetic pull apart that you really have to have a specific grip on the Switch 2 in order to remove it, which I guess is technically a good thing because it is secure. But the way that you handle your Switch 2 is going to be very different than the way that you handle your Switch or your Switch Lite. And I just want to say that I feel really uneasy, like I'm holding on to something that is very precious, which it is. You know, we should be taking care of our electronics and our technology the best of our abilities. It feels very unstable. And so if you struggle with grip, you may need to find different ways to hold on to your Switch, or maybe not even have the Switch in your hand at all. The other issue that I immediately discovered when I was even setting up the Switch was the way that the Switch 2 holds in your hands. Now, again, my hands are very small in comparison to some people. Some people may have larger hands and may be very excited by the fact that the Switch 2 is larger and much more comfortable in your hands, which is awesome for you. But for me, because it is thinner than the original Switch and also a different texture, I guess, I don't know how that's important, but it is for me. Like it feels like there's not, as I said, much of a grip. But the biggest issue that I have is where this places pressure on your hand. Now, as an artist, I am always very aware of my hand placement when it comes to making art, which means that you have to be very careful with your wrist placement, the way that you hold your hands, the grip that you have for whatever tool that you're using, the way that you're using your shoulder, the way that you're posturing yourself. This causes so much pressure between my thumb and the pointing finger to the point that I actually have to shake my hands off in order to regain some like movement and feeling. And I have noticed that in various positions, my pinkies in particular start getting like that fuzzy feeling, like it's losing feeling based on how I hold it. It may just be that I'm having to learn how to hold this differently than I do with my original Switch, but I'm kind of frustrated by the fact that the way that I enjoy playing a console game with a console, not with a Pro Controller, is going to be impacted from the get-go, especially since we paid so much money in order to get this at launch. Which leads us to the other conversation we have with these controllers. This is the original Switch and this is the Switch 2. The way that the original Switch holds is that this padding right here is basically in line with the Joy-Cons, whereas this has the Joy-Cons above it. Now, if you hold your hands like this, and you hold it for a long period of time, this is going to start putting pressure right here on your hands. And again, this may not bother you because of your hand size, or maybe you're just, you know, not an old disgruntled artist like me. But when you start feeling this in your thumbs, it can cause long-term issues with movement, mobility, and even pressure. On stream, I was actually playing Mario Kart World with this controller, and it actually hurt my hands after about 15 minutes. After 30 minutes or so, I was having to actually put down the controller and shake my hands and move it. And after an hour, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm done. Which is hard because, you know, as somebody who's on YouTube doing videos on the Switch because I love playing games on my consoles, this may actually impact future reviews of whether or not I would encourage you to play on the console at all. Aside from that, it is a lovely piece of equipment. The integrity, the durability of the hardware itself feels really sturdy. I mean, I know that I talked about being afraid of dropping it at any given moment, but I do think it would survive the impact, maybe hopefully. The one thing that I have been really excited about, however, is checking out the accessibility options that are in the Switch 2 that are not in the Nintendo Switch or its predecessor. I still have a few criticisms with regards to the accessibility that is available in the Switch 2, but let's get into what we have available. So when you go to your system settings, you actually do have an accessibility tab that is available within that folder, which has a wide variety of accessibility options that I think are the most prevalent and necessary for hardware. But again, this is very limited in comparison to other systems, but I'll talk about that later. What we have here is button mapping, which means that you're able to manually change which buttons mean what. Like if you want to use B for jump instead of A, or if you want to collect things with X, you were able to do that with button mapping. You're also able to reset your controller mapping. You're also able to save as a preset or load a preset. If you have different needs for different people, I'm not certain whether or not button mapping is hardware specific or if it is profile specific. Based on what I'm seeing with presets, it's probably hardware specific, which means that if you have the Switch 2 for a family and each family member has specific preferences for how they lay out their buttons for whatever need, that means you have the ability to change it depending on who's using your hardware. You're also able to add button mapping in quick settings, which I think is amazing. You will have quick settings in the home screen, which is as it's described, it has it in the home screen. So if you have if this is a family Switch, for example, and again, you have preferences for each individual person playing, that means that you don't have to go to the system settings and go through all these tabs. You have it available to you at the home screen. We also have text size from standard to large to maximum. You can also bold your text, high contrast, and do zoom, which I typically use for shaming my villagers in Animal Crossing. But I love the fact that we are seeing more with text options. There are certain texts that are easier for people with dyslexia to read. So I'm really curious whether or not this specific font is helpful, and let me know in the comments if it is. We also have the options for display colors, whether you want to invert your colors or do grayscale. There's also an option for your display settings where you can have it in light mode or dark mode depending on your preferences for your eyes. But what I'm really excited to see is mono audio. Mono audio allows for you to have the whole sound experience in one or either ear. If you are hard of hearing or deaf in either ear, that means that you can transfer the entire sound to the ear that is able to hear sound. We also have text-to-speech, which I think is absolutely necessary when it comes to adding more accessibility to hardware systems. Again, there are other systems that have had text-to-speech for literal years, and I will be talking about that in a minute, but the fact that Nintendo has added text-to-speech is incredible. We also have different types of voice types. Not sure what the different voice types are. Actually, you know what? Let's turn this on.
Type 1. Selected. Button. Vertical list. 1 of 2.
And then we have type 2.
Type 2. Selected. Button. Vertical list. 2 of 2. Off.
I like how it just says off, even afterwards. And then you can change your text-to-speech speed and volume, and change text-to-speech or to text during game chat, which I think is such a great addition. There are other options within system settings that I would also consider to be accessibility focused, but the fact that they are including accessibility as an option and making it a point to have customizable options for your gameplay in the hardware is a great step forward for Nintendo. I want to come at this video with celebrating the fact that Nintendo is progressing towards a more accessible model. Sort of. On one hand, the Switch 2 is more accessible than its predecessor. I think it does show Nintendo's willingness to understand the importance of accessibility within their gaming culture. I mentioned in my live stream when I had this conversation that East Asian culture, specifically Korea and Japan, do have a bit of a stigma when it comes to accessibility, because that would mean talking about these issues, whether it's mental health or, you know, mental disabilities or physical disabilities, and that is something that is considered, well, rude or shameful. Now, I'm doing a vast generalization, and it's not fair, okay? But in living in Korea, I do know that accessibility is something that is not on the forefront of making society better for everyone. And also just making this abundantly clear that Japan and Korea are not the same thing. But with accessibility with the Nintendo Switch 2, it is far behind the other consoles and other hardware systems that came out years before. We can talk about the Xbox systems, X and S, and the PlayStation 5, which all came out in November of 2020, which have all of these accessibility options to date. They also have something that Nintendo doesn't have, which are accessibility accessories that make their games much more playable from the get-go. And Although I'm really excited to see these options that Nintendo is bringing to their consoles as well as to the gameplay for their community, it's still years behind. I have this feeling that they've sacrificed a lot of the durability and integrity of the hardware for aestheticism. And while I do think that this is a step in the right direction, I'm kind of concerned by the fact that this is such an expensive piece of equipment. And while it is portable, the other systems are either cheaper or of the same value, but have been out for years, and also have the ability for their communities to adapt and provide ways of making the gameplay better. Especially since we have something like the Steam Deck, which, is an expensive piece of equipment, but it is easily modifiable, has accessibility in mind, and is basically a small handheld computer where you can do with it with what you want. I can't in good conscience tell you that the Switch 2 is, the pedestal of accessibility, because it's not. There is so much that the Switch 2 can do for the people who need it the most. But somebody in the community said it best, is that it's not necessarily an accessible option if accessibility is so expensive. Because accessibility is for everybody, right? And so if this is behind a paywall, what is this going to mean for Nintendo's accessibility going forward? But I am going to say that Nintendo is taking the step in the right direction. I just wish that with how expensive the Switch 2 was and how much hype was put into, how great it's going to feel playing, how great the games are going to look playing on the system itself, it feels like it could be better. There's nothing stopping Nintendo from adding accessibility accessories in the future. It is a new system for them at launch. They probably have other things that they're thinking about, but for a company that has a global-wide community, it really should consider its global-wide reach in bringing more people to play their games. I will say, with how expensive this piece of hardware is and how expensive these games are going forward, I do think that we should hold Nintendo to a very high standard when it comes to accessibility and playability for their games, which means having demos available for these games, whether or not we want to pay $80 to play a game at all. We need to have a standard of accessibility from every single game that Nintendo produces. Lists that can be found on Game Accessibility Guidelines or Can I Play That? Those are two websites that I utilize the most when it comes to talking about accessibility, which means that large gaming companies like Nintendo, like EA, like whomever is out there, we do need to start having quality assurance teams that are disabled so that you can understand exactly how people need accessibility in your games and in your hardware. I can't give in good conscience a glowing review of the Switch 2. Am I excited to have it? Absolutely. Mostly because I get to share that hype and excitement with friends who are also doing unboxings and trying out new games. I am excited for specific games that are going to be made available for the Switch 2, like Reanimal, maybe even Donkey Kong. I haven't decided. But again, these games, specifically ones that are produced by Nintendo, better have accessibility options, whether it's audio sliders, whether or not it's text-to-speech, whether or not we have varying degrees of difficulty for gameplay itself. But in all seriousness, Nintendo is a billion-dollar company. It can do better. The final thing I want to mention with the system settings is the fact that we have all of the accessibility options that are hidden within system settings, which means a person who is perhaps vision impaired or blind is not going to be able to go directly to text-to-speech. And so when you first receive the console and it turns on and it's all bright and pretty, I think a way to really make this console as accessible as possible is having text-to-speech on immediately, which also has a visual text so that people who are hearing impaired can turn it off if they want. That is a major criticism that I do have with the console itself, especially when it comes to accessibility, because it feels like while they made changes, and good ones, to their hardware, they didn't really consider what that was going to be upon opening. So if you have to go through different pages and tabs in order to get to accessibility to the things that you need or want, you are still dependent on somebody else for your gameplay experience. And I don't think that's a really good feeling for anyone. The reason why I think accessibility is so important is that we strive for as much autonomy and independence for everyone involved. And I think that the more autonomy and independence that somebody has with their gameplay and being able to set it up empowers them to do other things in their lives. But again, I'm coming at this from an able-bodied privilege. You know, I don't know how that would feel to other people. That's something that I think in going forward, that if you were designing hardware, that should be the standard until it's turned off, personally. But friends, that is my review for the Nintendo Switch 2. I wish I could tell you that you should just go out and get it, spend to your heart's content, but one, in this economy and in this global arena, I don't think it's necessary. If you are waiting with bated breath for the next Animal Crossing game to come to the Switch 2, by all means, save your money, save your time. If there is a game that's coming out specific to the Switch 2 that you want to get, you know, buy it when that game comes out. I don't think it's necessary, but at the same time, it's still fun. You know, it's kind of like you're getting used to a whole new thing, and we'll all figure it out, and who knows, maybe there will be accessories that allow for you to really enjoy the handheld experience with the Switch 2. But for now, I would say that if you do have hand pain issues for whatever reason, to be mindful of how that could impact your condition or how you feel. But I am really excited to see that Nintendo is moving towards a more accessible model. Could it have been better? Yes. Could they have pushed the envelope? Yes, especially with the price tag. But I am excited to see what Nintendo is going to do next. Well, friends, that is my review. So if you have any sort of comments, complaints, dialogue that you want to share about accessibility, especially when it comes to other systems like the Xbox or PlayStation, the Steam Deck, or even a computer, or even your phone, I want to hear about it. I don't know much about the Xbox or PlayStation experience, but from what I've been seeing and reading, that they've been kind of at this for a while. And I sincerely hope that we start developing a standard and a policy for accessibility, not only with gameplay, but with, you know, gameplay. As always, I'm going to leave you with the sentiment that I leave on every live stream and video, that I hope you're being kind to yourself and being kind to others and making art and playing games and encouraging others to do the same. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye!